difference between a human brain and AI, which is obviously, we're thinking about this a lot at the moment, and it's very front of mind. As a lawyer, as a regulated lawyer, I feel almost under attack because I qualified in 2009. I went through all this training here in London. I learned all this stuff. I did a law conversion course. We had to learn a ton of cases. It's very, very intensive, that training process. And that knowledge that I built up was like a moat when I was advising clients. But I was always told, well, to be a really, really effective lawyer, you need to kind of understand the business side. You need to understand the human side. And that sort of pushed me to go into tech and to move away from traditional kind of client servicing. And I'm feeling that more than ever at the moment. I'm working on something at the moment where there is kind of a clear legal position, and I'm being pushed to give a more rounded, more commercial answer, and also, because it's in the employment context, a more human answer as well. And I think that is why I feel especially lucky to be working at an HR platform, because that human element, you're never really that far away from it when you're making employment decisions, when you're making decisions that affect people's livelihoods, you're making decisions that are hugely emotive to people, because to most people, that paycheck landing every month and clarity about their job and their employment relationship is one of the top 2 things or top 3 things on their mind. So the human elements of the HR and recruitment industries, I think, are going to be here to stay for a long time, but we'll dive into some more detail during a short presentation, and then we'll have some 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. So what's Remote? Remote is an HR platform. We were founded in 2019. We offer employer of record services to customers who have an entity in country A, but they want to attract talent and hire from multiple countries all over the world. So we solve that really, really specific problem. And we also offer payroll services as well. I run the legal team. There's about 60 employees on the legal team. Globally, we have lawyers and legal professionals and legal ops and legal tech people from all over the world. And one of our key areas that we focused on is data protection, because we need to be GDPR compliant, but also cover data protection laws in a multitude of different countries. And we're also looking very, very carefully at employment workflows. So right from the onboarding of an employee when they're onboarding in, I'll always pick Bulgaria for some reason, but I've got a colleague in Bulgaria whose wedding I'm going to next month, so that's why it's front of mind. You're employing a colleague in Bulgaria. That onboarding process for a Bulgarian employee is totally different to any other country. So what we try to do is bake that compliance into our platform. We get inputs from the employee and from the customer, but we want to make the compliance process of onboarding that Bulgarian employee, whether it's their PTO, what their job description says, what pension is mandatory to offer, and how a termination would work. We try to get all of that complex stuff really clear to our customers in the platform early, build that knowledge base into our platform, and that's supported by AI because customers want to be able to go and ask their own questions, and they want to be able to interrogate that knowledge base. So that's basically what we're trying to do on the employment side, demystify things, even though there's a multitude of complexity in that cross-border employment sphere, make it as simple as possible for customers and also create a great employee experience as well. So we're going to be talking a bit about AI regulation and the infrastructure of global work, and I'm going to go into some details now. So as I was alluding to, there is a huge trend of HR leaders who are expecting talent to be hired outside of the primary country by 2026. And a lot of leaders have solved for that historically by setting up entities in those different jurisdictions, but in the startup and tech world, of course, we know that that's incredibly expensive, risky, and then the advisors are onto you saying, well, the big four are onto you, we need to advise you on how to do this compliantly, you've got local legal firms, all of that infrastructure supports that you might not necessarily want to do because you just want to get on with running your business. But cross-border hiring creates unbelievable amounts of benefits to companies. Even though you might not think that you need cross-border workforce, think about the benefits to your customers by having round-the-clock support. Think about the diversity of thought that you will be able to achieve by having employees coming on board from all different countries. And think about opportunities to sell to customers in those markets as well. So, of course, you need to think about tax rules. If you're selling in a country, you might need an entity there. But having a workforce where you can have representatives from all across the world providing services is a huge hack, if you ask me, even though you might be focused on one particular market at the moment. And obviously, with digital application processes, it's not that difficult to have hiring processes and recruitment processes online when you're hiring for a role. Although you do need to be careful about these AI bots applying for jobs, because I've heard some horrendous stories of AI bots getting through those right-to-work checks, getting through those interviews, and actually being onboarded, and then people realize, well, I'm paying a bot. This is not a good situation at all. But when you're using technology to manage this complexity, and you're working with these multiple legal systems and regulatory regimes and compliance obligations, you absolutely have to be able to rely on some kind of efficiency and technology to run that, because, as I mentioned before, you don't want to be paying advisors through the roof to maintain this international workforce, because it's just going to potentially slow everything down. And ideally, even though you want to respect the laws and the rules of all the different countries you're hiring in, there's also an argument for being able to treat an employee the same way, because then you have that smooth, efficient process for your workforce. So in my experience, it's about kind of balancing those two forces, respecting those local laws and rules, but also giving everyone kind of a seamless experience so you're not slowing everything down too much. So now talking about AI within workflows. So as I mentioned, we're managing huge candidate volumes. We're using AI to manage irregularities in payroll rules. So we work with many different payroll engines that, again, have many, many complex rules in different countries, and you cannot rely on humans to spot problems there. You've got a ton of different inputs. You've got a rules engine in your payroll engine, and you need to be able to use AI to assist you to spot problems when they occur, because if someone gets paid the wrong amount, and they have to file their taxes, and it can become incredibly complicated 3, 4, 5 years down the line to fix those problems with tax authorities. So, however, with AI and recruitment, there's very, very strict rules that have come in with the EU AI Act, particularly around recruiting and the human judgment aspect of making recruitment decisions, because of the chances of there being bias in those processes. So in New York as well, there is legislation that's been brought forward that requires you to do bias audits. And I haven't actually seen that many examples of this playing out in practice, but my thought at the moment is that we're quite free to use tools as part of recruitment to narrow down CVs, to be specific about the criteria of what we're looking for, but we need to be able to prove that there is a human making that decision at the end of the process, and that human is making that decision according to objective criteria, because of that thing that I mentioned at the beginning around the employment relationship being so emotive. And I don't think that anyone will ever accept an employment decision being made by a bot, however sophisticated that model is, whatever opus model it is. No one will ever accept making employment decisions based on AI, and no one will ever accept making termination decisions based on AI, because when you make a termination decision and you communicate that to an employee, it is a really, really human-led thing. You cannot rely on technology to do that for you, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I really don't think that's ever going to happen. So it's about where you use the AI. And it's about having clear structures and documented processes for showing how technology aids parts of a process and where a human gets involved as a control. Not necessarily just at the end of that process, but there needs to be touch points probably throughout a process to make sure that it's being done properly, whether it's the recruitment decision of somebody or the offboarding decision, because those are, in my experience, the two areas where there is most risk for a company as part of a process. And I'm seeing also technology that is using as a first pass interview AI to interview a candidate and give them really quick feedback. Like on the previous panel, there was a pitch deck reference. So you can be a candidate applying for a company, and the AI is giving you feedback on whether you're a suitable fit for the role. I think that's absolutely great. I think you've got candidates waiting weeks for responses on applications where humans are overwhelmed with applications. At Remote, we have quite a powerful brand, and we get thousands of applications, and it's a really poor candidate experience. But you need to have oversight in how those CVs are being reviewed, how the criteria are being reviewed, and you need to have a human signing off the governance framework and signing off the decision-making as to whether the candidate's going to make it through or not. Because algorithmic influence is really, really increasing, and I'm not saying that we need to do away with this stuff. It's really, really important that it drives efficiency, but we need to have the human, need to have the human oversight. So just to give a bit more detail on algorithmic management, that's systems that track, score, assign, evaluate, or nudge work through data and automated logic. And research from the European Parliament estimates that more than 40% of EU workers are currently exposed to some form of algorithmic management. And this isn't just gig platforms, but it extends into mainstream business environments. And the nature of cross-border work as well, when you combine it with these algorithmic tools, increases the importance of clear accountability. There are not just algorithms with making recruitment and termination decisions, but with blue-collar workers in particular, there's going to be algorithms at play dealing with really complex things like time tracking and time and attendance, which is one of the most complex areas of employment law when it comes to shift workers and collective bargaining agreements and union protections as well. So whatever rules are being baked in and whatever algorithms are at play to monitor employees who are working and monitor compliance with rules, they also need to be really, really carefully checked and need to be heavily audited by humans who are making sure that there are fair outcomes. So just to talk about a quick example, imagine you've got a company that hires employees in several EU countries. They use AI-enabled screening software hosted elsewhere. Payroll runs through a global platform. Contractors are engaged in additional jurisdictions. So each layer is adding operational value, but it also adds complexity as well. So someone's going to ask, well, who approved these hiring outcomes? Where's the documentation stored? How are decisions reviewed if challenged? Which regulator has authority over these decisions? And so I think frameworks are important here. I think HR is often baked into policies, but I think policies are quite somewhat useless in these situations. You need to have clear frameworks and clear steps of what happens when and what controls are in place to make sure that there are not adverse outcomes. And you can have AI help you to develop those frameworks, and you can have AI help you to test those frameworks. But still, at the end, you need a human to make sure that there is the litmus test or the sniff test is that there are not adverse outcomes. And you need humans with experience who are able to spot irregularities and are able to spot potential litigation and things going wrong. So I finished my talk now, and I've got 2 minutes for any questions that anyone might have in the audience. Thank you. Well, any questions? There's one over here.
How do you make sure that the human...
Wait, sorry, someone's sprinting to you.
My apologies.
It's okay.
How do you make sure that the human making the employment decision isn't just ticking the box that the AI has left for them? How does that work?
So I think, I hope everybody heard the question. So I think if a human is making a decision, and it's based on some AI information that has already been presented, there needs to be some kind of independent thought there that an auditor can see has involved some degree of taking a step back and thinking about it. It doesn't matter if all the thinking is based on policies, but it matters that the human has signed off that independently their view is that this is the correct outcome. But again, how do you quantify that is a really, really good question, because at the end of the day, it's just a load of data, and the human decision is going to be documented, which is better than previously. Before all this stuff was digital, you just get, well, John from accounts has hired someone new, and you wouldn't know what happened because you wouldn't have any paperwork surrounding it. So one of the advantages is that you actually have a lot of documented information now about what's happened, but how to check that that's human versus AI or algorithmic is a challenge. And I think that's where AI governance is going, and helping to clarify how you demonstrate that oversight, how you demonstrate that independence. And even if you do demonstrate that independence, there are still many stupid decisions that are being made by humans. So you still haven't necessarily solved it then.
Thank you.
Well, I think that just the 15 minutes has elapsed, so thank you very much. It was really good to talk. If anyone wants to follow up with any ideas, connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.